And welcome to Climate Chat. I am your host, Dan Miller. And today our special guest is Eugene Kirpichov, who's the CEO of Work on Climate. And we are going to find out what Work on Climate is. And as part of that discussion later on, we're going to be talking about regenerative economics as well. And I think it's going to be a fascinating discussion, really kind of in two parts. One kind of a practical discussion and a little more of a philosophical discussion about climate change a little bit later. But first of all, Eugene, welcome to Climate Chat. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Dan. I'm very excited.
So I think we should start off about how you came about to start Work on Climate, because that actually, it's an interesting story all to itself. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you came to start Work on Climate?
Yeah. So I think I'm going to begin with something in my path that has nothing to do with climate whatsoever. So when I was basically my whole career before I ended up starting Work on Climate with my Google colleague, Cassandra, in 2020, my whole career and my whole education had to do with software engineering. So nothing to do with climate or movement building or systems change or nonprofits. And, here I am running a climate movement building systems change nonprofit. But one important component was when I was about 15 or 16, my godfather asked me to help him with some calculations. So he was a quantum physicist, a nuclear physicist, and he wanted some calculations done. And he asked me to help. This was my first ever paid gig. And so the calculations were in a certain programming system called Mathematica. Doesn't really matter. The point is that it was based on a particular paradigm of programming and software engineering called functional programming. Again, does not matter what it is, but the point is that I got absolutely, really excited about it. I really fell in love with that paradigm. And before long, I was, using it to do all my schoolwork. Basically, I was approaching tasks in a different way than, let's say, my co-students and classmates. Then when I had my first full-time work, I was, approaching those tasks differently. I started making friends in that area. I started running meetups together with them. At some point, I started a journal together with some people I met. And throughout this whole thing, it just I was doing things somewhat differently in a way that nobody was asking me to. And it brought me a great deal of joy. It felt like I'm, creating my own world in the world in which I exist, the world of software engineering. I was creating my own world based on, this thing that I'm really excited about. And it had all kinds of benefits. First of all, just the sense of wonder and discovery. I enjoyed the respect of my peers because I could do things in ways that were not just better but unthinkable to somebody who is not familiar with that paradigm. Obviously, it was good for my career as well, and I made many friends, and some of those friends actually ended up being really close friends who welcomed me to the US when I moved to the US. But I think the most important thing that this did for me was it kind of changed my identity from somebody who navigates his place in the world to somebody who builds his own world. So this was a big shift. I was not, identifying as a leader for a good chunk of my career and my initial path, and then I did. So let's move a little bit closer to climate and Work on Climate. We will return to this later on. So again, 15 years of my software career, nothing to do with climate. And then around 2019, maybe even late 2018, I learned a few things about just, how concerning things are. And it got to the level where it became morally intolerable for me to do work that's not connected to this. And I think different people react to this information in different ways. Many people, when they see that things are this scary, they're like, oh, shit, that's so big. There's not much I can do about this. All I can do is live my life. Some people are just paralyzed by fear. They're like, I want to do something, but I just can't. I just can't process this information. So they continue being in the state of being unable to process. I am one of what seems like a relatively rare group of people who are motivated by fear. It's not a good thing. It's just I just happen to be like that. So for me, it worked. And helped me develop the determination to do. something and to shift my career. And around the time when I was really at the peak of this, I guess, concern, I happened to come across my colleague Cassandra and learned that she was also feeling things about climate. And we hit it off, and a week later, we one-upped each other into handing our resignations. So we didn't know what we were going to do. We knew that it was going to be about climate and that we're going to dedicate all of our time to figuring out what we're going to do. And then the next thing that happened and what led to the creation of Work on Climate is that both of our goodbye notes went viral, and like 500,000 people saw them, and hundreds of them started emailing us, about half and half split between people like us who were saying, I want to do something about this problem too, but I don't know how. And the other half was people who were building climate solutions. And this was probably my first shock, which was the realization that solving climate change is about building a different economy. Like, it's not about just disallowing certain things. It's not about just changing our consumption patterns. Really, all it is we have an economy that works in one way, and we need an economy that works in a different way. And that's a matter of rebuilding every single sector and rebuilding the way that the sectors are wired together and so on. So while previously I thought that it is about, I thought of solving climate change as a separate industry. There is big industry and then there's climate solutions. And I realized that that's the wrong way to look at it, that it is really about transforming the transportation sector, transforming the energy sector, transforming the manufacturing sector, transforming the finance sector, transforming the education sector, and so on and so on. And that was a very encouraging way of looking at it, because it means that people in every sector can play a hand in it and play a part in it. So we decided to start Work on Climate because it was clear that there is a lot of work to be done in every sector, and people with all kinds of skills could be helpful. And at the same time, there are so many people who want to be helpful, they just don't know that their help is even needed, or they hold preconceptions that they have no role to play. So that's why we started Work on Climate. It was always founded on the belief that it is about helping people begin acting on their values, on building a different economy. And in terms of the mechanism of action, how Work on Climate was going to help them. Well, we wanted people to have the same experience that we had. So even though I was very concerned and kind of on the precipice of leaving Google, I actually left only when I had a bridge to the other side in the form of a community. Right. So I had an identity as like the guy who's really good at building big data and AI systems. And it was a lot of fun. And I had all my buddies with whom I was bonding about how we're going to build these systems and about interesting computer science problems. I had a certain, status in my industry, which is pleasant to have. And there I'm a nobody. And
in climate, you're a nobody.
Yeah. It's scary. And like when you're not there, you don't know how welcoming the space is. So it turns out that all it takes to make the jump is just one person with whom you're in this together. And that is sufficient to really overcome those barriers. So we wanted.
But let's get into because I think for many people listening to the program, they have no idea what Work on Climate is, what it's used for. So tell us a little bit about, in a practical sense, what is Work on Climate and how can it be used by people who are concerned about climate, want to do more, but don't know what to do?
Yeah. So as far as Work on Climate members go, Work on Climate is a community where you can come to discover together with others what you're going to do about climate as a professional. And you can make the connections that you need to do it. You can make the connections that you need to develop a sense of belonging and to develop yourself as a leader and to find the right partnerships for your work and so on. So the way that it looks like, tactically, historically, the way it looked like is that we have a Slack community. We have many events and workshops to which many thousands of people have come and met other people there and learned from experts and so on. So virtual events and workshops, mentorship programs where you can simply go on the website, like go to the Expert Office Hours program and just book time for free with an expert in some area of climate with whom you can talk about how can your skills and your other professional strengths apply. So these kinds of programs that all have the goal of helping people develop the connections, and through the connections develop a different sense of identity and develop, the resources and network to start doing something about it. So this is how we operated historically. It is changing now because the way that we frame our work is changing. For most of our time, our work has been framed around helping people get climate jobs. So we were operating from the assumption that because there's so much work to be done, if we just get people into where their skills are already needed, that will result in progress. And there were some encouraging developments for a period of time, like the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act that created a lot more climate jobs, and the various regulation being passed here and there all around the globe. But at some point, cracks started appearing in the picture. And this was even before Trump got elected. We just started observing. So we had a tremendous impact in this mode of action, by the way. By our latest count, somewhere between 3,000 to 7,000 people credit us with the fact that they're now doing the climate work they're doing.
Okay.
Which, if you do some, back of the envelope napkin calculations, that's hundreds of millions of dollars of human capital that are doing climate work thanks to us, which is about 100 times more than our expenses since the beginning of time as a nonprofit. So very high leverage, but it's still, we started asking ourselves, a few thousand people, that's good. But that seems to be like about 10% of the people who want to work on it. What about the others? Are they just doomed to keep scrolling the job board until something comes along?
Okay.
And we realized that we actually can't afford to have the job market set a limit on how much impact we're going to create and how much impact that people that we work with and care about are going to create. And then once you start thinking in that direction, you realize that getting people into jobs is just fundamentally a rather anemic form of action when it comes to systems change. You can't really change a system simply by giving it what it already wants.
Okay.
Certainly, it's the system's desire to have people work on climate. It exists, but the really hard part is increasing this desire, not just feeding into it, right? Which useful, but it's not enough. And then I think really the last straw was when I listened to a podcast by Daniel Schmachtenberger. It was a podcast about the polycrisis. So and the meta crisis. So for listeners who are not familiar with this concept, these are two dual ideas. I like explaining that polycrisis refers to the fact that we're facing many interlocked, overlapping crises at the same time. There's a climate collapse. There's a collapse of biodiversity. There is the gradual collapse of democracy and our ability to make decisions together as a society. There are AI risks. There is breakdown of global collaboration that creates risk of wars, and so on and so on. And we're nowhere absolutely nearly on track to solving any one of them. And any one of them can really end civilization as we know it. So we don't stand the chance of avoiding a civilizational collapse if we solve them one by one. That's the bad news, really bad news. The good news is that these are the same crises. These are all symptoms of essentially an economic system and a social system that is architected in a way that any kind of health and these crises are simply invisible to it.
I'm sorry, any kind of what is?
Any kind of systems health problems, like the health of the climate system, the health of soil systems, the health of our democracy, the health of our collective public and mental health. It is all invisible to the economic system. All that is visible to it is the bottom line of individual companies one by one. And just like if that's all that you're able to see, you simply lack the ability to see real problems and act on them. So no wonder. And that was scary. So that really made me question, should I even be still running this organization? If our main mode of action it's clearly powerless to do something about a problem this deep, like you can't change the architecture of the economic system by getting people into jobs. It's just not going to happen. So yeah, for some time I was wondering, should I hand over work on climate to somebody who is excited about that mode of action while I figure out something to do about the real deal. And I discovered that my board and my staff were actually in the same boat. So we decided to embark together on a journey of figuring out what we're going to do about it. And that's how we landed at the concept of first two big changes to work on climate. One was the change of our guiding vision simply from reducing emissions to a regenerative economic system. And second is from helping people find climate jobs to helping people become climate leaders. And I'm happy to explain what both of these things actually mean, but we have these two big shifts.
So, but yes, but I would actually, I hope when you describe them that you actually describe it from a practical point of view of our listeners who are all very concerned about climate. Some of them have ideas for climate solutions. Some of them would just like to meet up with other like-minded people to maybe do some kind of other climate action. So from that practical point of view, first of all, like, how do they get started? Do they go to, we have links in the description, by the way, but workonclimate.org, right? They go there. And what are some of the, and I want you to expand on what you were just saying on the new direction, but right now, what can people do on the site besides find a job? You mentioned finding a mentor, maybe, if you have an idea for a climate solution, getting someone to help you with it. What are some of the things you mentioned? Finding climate events. So what are some of the practical things that our listeners can do by going to work on climate?
Yeah. So joining the community is very simple and free. You just go to the website and press join. You fill in the intake form and you join the community. You go introduce yourself and you're on your way. So it's very simple. And then what you want to do from then on, well, I would recommend that you do go to our events and meet people. I would recommend that if you have specific questions that you're struggling with, you go and ask them. And I think the biggest thing that's holding people back is that they get stuck in reading things and lurking. And I hate to disappoint you, but you're not going to get anywhere by that. And I guess the good news is that you're going to get dramatically farther than you thought you would if you just start actually talking to people. It's an exceptionally welcoming space. So, join, come to events and connect with people there. Find people that you want to connect with on Slack. Either ask your own questions, or if you're really feeling shy and you're like, oh no, who am I to ask a question in this community? If you're that shy, well, that's okay. Maybe that's where you are today, but then find somebody and just DM them, right? Like use Slack search for some keywords and DM them. And maybe half of the people maybe they're too busy and they will ignore you, but the other half will not. So, email 10 people, like 3 to 5 will come back to you. So the point of it is really to get started and learn from other people, develop your connections, and learn from other people. This is also much, much more efficient in terms of learning and understanding the space than any kind of reading that you can do, because people hold knowledge and wisdom of things that nobody has gotten the chance to write down. And the space is changing faster than anyone can write it down. But I think the most important thing is that once you start talking to other people, even if you don't realize it, it immediately starts changing your identity. While before maybe you continue to think of yourself as like, oh, I'm not a climate person, I'm just looking. After you've talked with a couple of people and you see that you actually have a lot in common, you have the same values, they are encouraging you, they were someone like you in the past, you start thinking like, maybe I am a climate person. Like maybe climate people are people like me who are just bringing whatever strengths they have to this huge problem. So that's what the community actually does for you. It helps you find these connections.
Great. So now talk a little bit about where you were going with this new direction and maybe some of the new ways that you can use work on climate in this new direction.
Yeah. So let me give 2 examples of something that our members have done that represents the new direction. So one is this gentleman, his name is Kyler, and he's a finance professional. And when he was looking for what he's going to do about climate, he did neither of the 2 things you would expect he would do. Neither did he compete for finance roles at climate startups, nor did he take his current finance job at the time and make it greener.
Okay.
He could have done both of these things, but that's not what he did. He did something different. He found a new job with a building inspection company that was hiring for a senior level finance leader. And while joining them, he convinced them to start a new line of business focused on finding energy efficiency opportunities. So this company works with $20 billion worth of real estate. They have 6,000 building inspectors. They have, I don't know, like 250 enterprise clients. And now, thanks to him, a good chunk of this business power is used to decarbonize the built environment. They didn't ask him to do this, right? That's not what they were hiring for. They were hiring for a finance leader. And he came in and he proactively, exercised his agency, exercised his understanding of the space, exercised his, interpersonal bonding and influence skills, and convinced them that it's a good thing for them to do. And they were like, "Yeah, do you want to do it?" And he said yes. So now he's leading that direction. So this is an example, coming back to where I started, of creating your own world. He didn't simply find his place in the world, he created his own world wherever he was. Another example is one of our board members, Zoe Samuel. She has a very interesting background. Yeah, Dan, I think you know her.
Yeah.
So her background is originally in theater and comedy. And then she did then she had a UX role at Google for a long time. And while at Google, she also asked herself, what can I do about climate? And again, she didn't simply green her UX practice. She started Google's internal community of employees focused on climate. And she did it in a very particular way that turned out to be extremely impactful. So this community, their goal is to help Google incubate climate positive lines of business and products. So it's not like about yelling at executives to do less AI. It wouldn't be so bad if they did less AI, but that's not what this community tries to do. What they do is basically when some of Google's business units wants to incubate a new climate positive line of business, like let's say Project Sunroof was incubated this way. Of course, this project is under-resourced. Of course, this project needs some help. So these projects come to this group and ask, help us. And a bunch of 20%ers with Google's caliber of skills jump and help. And so this group, which is now over 4,000 people, they deserve a lot of credit for the fact that over half of business lines at Google X are focused on climate today. Again, that's something that most people don't know, but over half of those projects are climate focused. Both the currently active ones and the ones that were shut down. Obviously, it's a natural part of it, but so many of them are focused on climate and owe a lot in their early stage development to the help of this group. Another example that's even simpler, something I did shortly after leaving Google. Shortly before leaving Google, I was presenting at an AI conference, presenting my Google work. And after I left Google, I met a bunch of companies that were using AI for climate. And I thought how come I never heard of them? How come there was not even a whiff of any of these companies at the AI conferences where I've ever been to in my life? And so I went to that conference and was like, hey, guys, I just did my talk with you guys. I just left Google. I'm doing this climate thing. And did you know that 20% of all venture investment is going into climate, which was true at the time. Now it's less, but still a substantial amount. Did you know that there's so much going on? Did you know that there are so many companies using AI for it, this company and that company and that company? So they ignored my email. A week later, I sent another one with slightly more elaborate rhetoric. And they said, wow, how interesting. I had no idea. Sounds cool. Do you want to be the chair of this track? And so for the next 3 years in a row, we ran climate track at one of the leading AI conferences called Predictive Analytics World. So again, it was not particularly hard to get the buy-in for it. You just got to do it. You have to identify as somebody who does this sort of thing, who creates their own world. And you have to go and make a case for it, and then you have to do it. It was hundreds of hours of hard work to actually organize those tracks. But it's cool. It's a lot of fun. So we did it. So what this means for work on climate today and what we're doing. So we are, again, changing work on climate from an engine for helping people find existing climate jobs and existing other opportunities to an engine for leadership development, for helping basically rank and file professionals everywhere step into the capacity they have, even without realizing it, to be leaders of this transformation at their companies, in their industries, in their communities, in any kind of professional sphere that they're part of. So professionals have so much to offer here in terms of leadership in every sector, because like everybody knows some people, often some influential people. Everybody in an industry knows how the industry works and how change happens in that industry. They have some authority, even if it's not very much, but they have some. They have some influence, right? They sometimes have some resources. So they have all kinds of strengths that are associated with being a professional in this industry. And until now, the climate movement has not really been calling upon those strengths. The climate movement has mainly been calling upon strengths that are basically that everyone has equally, like your ability to choose what kind of food you buy at the store, and your ability to vote, and like your ability to pick up the phone and call your senator. And like, come on, you spent your whole career, 10, 15 years building a whole spectrum of capacities, and all you think that all you can do is call your senator. That's ridiculous. You got to use those strengths. And so we want to help people use those strengths, and we want to build an organized movement that concentrates these strengths for solving system change challenges together, right? So this is the way that all movements work. This is the way the civil rights movement worked. This is the way various democracy movements worked. They help people develop as leaders and begin doing things that no employer is asking them to do. They help people figure out how they're going to apply their strengths in service of this grand goal. And then they organize people so that their efforts reinforce each other, rather than just like this person acting and that person acting. So that's what we're doing. To that end, we are doing a few things. One is we're changing all our virtual programming to be framed in this way. So to help people not just like learn where the opportunities are and develop basic literacy, but for example, we're changing our success stories from stories of people who essentially have found their way to a job to stories of people who have successfully driven some kind of change. Right? We are changing our kind of sector deep dive events from understanding what the solutions in the sector look like to also talking about how the systems in the sector look like. Like, why is the sector the way it is? How does the sector change? When it comes to people who change the sector, how do they do it? So developing really literacy, systems literacy, and if I may use some, revolutionary terminology, developing a critical consciousness. So what that means is like developing the ability to see the systems not as something that like it's just the way it is, like some rich people made it that way and that's just the way it is, to more like these systems were made by humans, and as a human, to be human means to change things in the way that I want to, in a way that I stand for. So developing this ability to see themselves as agents of change. And most importantly, we're reorganizing the community from being global virtual to being a family of distributed chapters focused on specific sectors and regions. For example, our pilot chapter is focused on food systems in the California Bay Area. And kind of the objective of the chapter is to build a regenerative food system in Bay Area through the power and the leadership and the strength of food system professionals in the area. And people who have some influence over the food system. So chapters like this, some of them will be run by work on climate staff, like this pilot chapter, but most of them will be run by community members, and our job is to support them. So we have a program that supports people who want to run chapters focused on transforming certain sectors and regions. And we're already working with quite a few people who want to do that in all kinds of areas. For example, like one group of people is working on reducing contrails in aviation. And another group is working on regenerative finance. Another group is working on public transit. So we're helping organizers of this group become good organizers and become good at mobilizing their people to be leaders. So the purpose of each of these chapters is to incubate leaders, and even more importantly, to incubate collective action efforts among these leaders. Let's say if you want to do something about food waste in Bay Area, certainly you could just do it, organization by organization. Like this organization reduced wastes in their cafeteria. That organization, I don't know, changes how they procure food to waste less of it. But it becomes a lot more powerful if you get people together to collectively make sense of the food system and to collectively identify like what is a good vision that they all want to work towards and how can each of them be a part of that vision. And then once people feel like they're part of something, rather than they are simply they share values but each act in separate ways, action starts happening a lot better. So that is what we are working to make happen. We're currently working to really develop the methodologies for how to do that. Nobody has done this in quite this way. So nobody has quite developed the art and discipline of activating professionals as climate leaders towards systems change challenges. So that is the big task ahead of us, is to do a lot of experiments and ultimately learn how to do this and help other people learn how to do this, and this way kind of play a role in catalyzing this movement.
So let's do this. Let's get back to that way again. Sorry.
Yeah.
I saw in one of your interviews, though, where you expressed pessimism about our ability to achieve the goals that you're talking about here. Can you talk a little bit about that and what that makes you think about in terms of the future?
Yeah, I think many people would see it as pessimism. I see it as equanimity. So I frame it differently. So I think for a long time, my own climate action was coming from the desire to avert disaster. Like we can all agree that a disaster would suck, so we want to avert it. And so we kind of run with our pants on fire trying to avert it. And then that very quickly leads you into some extremely uncomfortable psychological spaces. Like with one part of your brain, you say, we must go net zero by 2030. But the other part of your brain says, like, come on, dude, it's not going to happen by 2030. It's just not happening. And if you kind of lack the ability to mentally have a dialogue between these parts and have them develop a healthy relationship, then you are just constantly in denial, and sooner or later it bites you. Like it takes a hit on your motivation, it causes you to burn out, because you realize that you're doing something that you can't really defend with a straight face. You can't say that it's actually going to do what you're saying it's going to do. And you can only lie to yourself for so long. So this is not pessimism. I can't say with a straight face that we're going to avoid some really, really major climate disasters. By really major, I don't mean like, another 1,000 heat deaths. I mean more like hundreds of millions of people having nowhere to live and hundreds of millions of people dying. I think that's simply something that's going to happen. So I was only able to really stare this really scary prospect in the face after I began seriously practicing Vipassana meditation. So for me, that gave me a big upgrade in my ability to deal with difficult things in my own head and difficult things in my circumstances. And after that, I began framing my work like not so much as avoiding disaster, but more like as patiently continuing to build the future that I want, even if that future is going to be something that emerges from the ashes of the old world. So I certainly I would love it if we figure out a way to avoid the disaster, but the work that I do does not depend on whether that's going to be the case or not. I think that our task is to build the new economy that is going to be, beautiful and regenerative, and it's going to make things better as it goes. And what we will build, I don't frame it as preserving what we have today. I frame it as developing humanity's ability to build something beautiful in the future.
Okay. Well, by the way, I think that work on climate people would find a home here on Climate Chat and vice versa. I mean, I think we try to cover the future sort of in a realistic way and trying to avoid the stories that people are telling themselves that to make them feel better. But so one of the areas that you're now focused on, and you wrote an article about, which, by the way, again, links in the description to that as well, is on regenerative economics, which I think is part of this future that you're talking about. So why don't you just start out by telling us what is regenerative economics?
Yeah. I was recently talking to my grandma about this, and I was very delighted that
Describe it like you described it to her. That might be good, right?
Yeah, I was really delighted that it actually resonated with her. While previously, when I told her about my work, she was like, very good, Eugene. You're I'm very happy for you. But this time she was actually engaged. So I would begin by saying, look at, for example, look at a rainforest, or look at a human body, or look at any other living system. Let's say a rainforest. There is an exchange of resources and information happening between different beings that inhabit it. Whether it's rabbits or capybaras or trees or bacteria or worms and so on. So there is an exchange of resources and information happening there. It's an economy in the meaningful sense of the word. Certainly, it looks nothing like our economy, but it's an economy. And likewise, our economy, in a meaningful sense, it's also a living system, right? It's alive. It's like very different in shape from a rainforest, but fundamentally, these are kind of the same thing, just architected very differently, right? And one very interesting observation we can make about something like the rainforest is that all activity that happens in it tends to strengthen its health. So on one hand, certainly there is a lot of collapse and death in the economy. So it's not like nothing dies in the rainforest. It's not like no ecosystems ever collapse. They do. But if we look at the track record of living systems, some of them have an astonishing track record of surviving in a healthy form for a very long time, like tens of millions of years. So clearly there is something profound there. So they have this wonderful property. Or let's say in my body, all my cells work together to keep me healthy. That is the only point of the activity of the exchange in resources in my body. It is to keep me healthy so that I'm able to do meaningful things. And it's been working pretty well for a while, for 38 years. Hopefully will continue for a while longer. So really nice property. Our economy today, unfortunately, doesn't have this property. Our economy has many great properties. It's very efficient. It's very good at growing things. These are all useful tools to have in your toolbox. But when it comes to the property of surviving for a very long time, because the activity is aligned with what it takes to survive a very long time, our economy doesn't have that one, right? It's simply absent. And it is a very profound property, and it is one that is very difficult to develop. So a regenerative economy, it is the idea of first acknowledging that it would be nice to have this property, where basically the harder our economy goes, the healthier it gets. Where, as business activity happens in the economy, our public health improves, our soil gets healthier, our connection with each other improves, our climate system gets healthier, and so on. And really, there are only two alternatives. Either as the economy goes, it gets healthier, or as the economy goes, it gets sicker. And if it's constantly getting sicker, there's only so far that can go before it collapses. So the only way for us to have an economy that's even going to be around for a long time is to make it be regenerative. So the idea of a regenerative economy is to first acknowledge that this is desirable and acknowledge that we don't have that today. And second, it is also to ask, to start seeing our economy also as a living system, and ask, how the hell do they do it? How do living systems that have this property, why do they have it? Is there something that we can transfer to our context? This is not at all about going back to the forest and living in the woods. This is not at all about saying that our economy must be the rainforest. It is about simply observing that there seems to be an example in nature of solving a problem that we are facing and we haven't figured out how to solve. Can we learn something from how it is solved there? And when it comes to how it is solved there, when it comes to how it is solved there, let me, come back to the history of how nature learned to solve it in the first place. there's been plenty of collapse and plenty of death, and there's been plenty of basically natural selection, both at the level of individual species, but even more importantly, at the level of ecosystems. So ecosystems that didn't have that property, they died, and they're not around to tell the tale. So initially there was a primordial soup of single cells. Before that, there was a primordial soup of chemicals. Then there was a primordial soup of single cells. Then there was some of these cells somehow learned to join into multicelled organisms that turned out to be, healthy by themselves and even more thriving and effective. Then animals developed and plants developed, and animal and plant ecosystems developed, and now humans have their own ecosystems. But the point is that throughout this process, basically the evolutionary process was selecting for forms of complex organization that are healthy and can survive for a long time. So it was not, many people hold the naive view that natural selection is about like one animal competing against the other. That is a very small fraction of what there is to it. It is also forms of collaboration competing one against the other, and which ones can survive for a long time. So, for example, an elephant, it's not just a really competitive bacteria. It's not like, bacteria were fighting with each other until the elephant bacteria emerged and, won over all of them. No, it is a dramatically more complex being, which evolved through increase in complex organization, right? So the same process needs to happen in our economy. And I realize this may be sounding a little bit abstract, so let me make it a little more concrete. Our economy already has many forms of complex organization. So we don't just have like everybody doing their own thing. We have people who are organized into, C corporations. We have the stock market. We have nation states. We have unions. We have professional and, personal communities. We have worker-owned cooperative. We have different forms of finance stacks and so on. So these are all different forms of complex organization in the economy. It just happens that they're not very healthy. And they are on track to suffer the same fate as natural ecosystems that weren't very healthy. So I guess the thesis in my head is that this is where we must direct our innovation and our imagination, figuring out new forms of working together that are healthy and are able to take care of their own health and the health of what they depend on.
And can you get people though to agree with you on that? I mean, first, I agree with you on that, but I'm just thinking how if you were approaching a politician and describing this as with my policies, we're not going to have any more wars. I mean, this is literally what the pitch was in the last presidential election here in the U.S. And of course, that didn't really work out. But then AI is going to solve all our problems. So with technology improvements and poverty has gone down, hunger has gone down because we're making so much advanced progress. So people, I don't know if they would agree with the premise. I mean, of course, and of course, vast majority of them are ignoring the climate and these other breakdowns. I mean, so if you can get them to accept that would be, well, first of all, that would advance them towards regenerative economics, but it would also, of course, then get a lot more resources to focus on solving climate and the other planetary problems. How do you get regular people, not beyond your grandmother, how do you get regular people to even accept your premise? Yeah,
I don't think they have to. Let me explain why. Let me use an example of AI itself, right? So ever since the beginning of computing, there were people who believed that one day we can create powerful artificial intelligence. And many people were driven by that vision. So I would be the first to say that the form in which this vision has taken shape is rather unfortunate. But I still think it's illustrative to trace its development. So at the very advent of computing and digital technologies, digital innovation was not a thing. And there were a bunch of, curmudgeons who were saying, like, what is this digital innovation nonsense? Innovation is when you invent a new chemical. Innovation is when you invent a new engine, and so on. And, look who's laughing now. But there were many people who were really excited about the potential of computing and digital innovation. And so they developed this field of computing, right? They started with, after the transistor was developed, that represented a leap in progress after vacuum tubes. Then integrated circuits were developed. Then, the first programs and operating systems were developed, and so on. And eventually it got really powerful. The point is that throughout this whole thing, you didn't actually need people's buy-in about computing being the force behind everything. You just needed to apply. Whenever people faced a practical problem, you could come to them, and if you're somebody who thinks that computing needs to develop, you would come to them with a computing solution to that problem, right? And so as we solved increasingly complex practical problems through digital technologies, the field of digital technologies has gained the power that it has gained today, and it didn't even take that long, right? It only took maybe 2 generations. So I think that the process of building towards the regenerative economy should take exactly the same shape. So we, me, various my friends in the space, maybe you, maybe many of our listeners, believe in the potential of this, but we're only going to make progress if we do not yell at other people to accept our perspective, but if we help them solve practical problems that they're facing, but through this approach. So
I don't know. You're going to have a lot. I mean, the old expression that people find it a lot easier to imagine the end of civilization than they do the end of capitalism, for example. I mean, and just the thought of having an alternative economic solution to our problems, I think, is going to it won't just be like thrown out in the as an idea that compete with other ideas. I mean, there's going to be a lot of disinformation and attacks and everything like that. I don't know. It's been has been the case for climate solutions, right? I mean, lots of windmills kill birds or whales or whatever, these kind of things, which are kind of ridiculous things. Yet it does prevent progress, right, in these areas.
Yeah, but again, then, just as in order to advance digital technologies, we did not need to sell people an idea that digital technologies have to be the future. We don't need to tell people to get on board with the regenerative economics train. So what I'm talking about here is not like, let's solve public health by dismantling capitalism. That's not what I'm proposing to do. I'm proposing that the next time we're facing some problem, let's say a public health problem, or the problem of developing electric and transitioning to electric vehicles in the community, and this way improving their respiratory health and improving their energy bills. So traditionally, the approach to this is, okay, first we acknowledge that we need some kind of innovation, but usually that innovation means developing a new product. And I think that to think that innovation means developing a product, that is like thinking that innovation means inventing a new chemical, and completely ignoring that there is a whole different type of innovation. So in this case, we would say, okay, we need to improve public health. Let's do it through better coordination in this community. So rather than trying to invent a new product, just like invent a new medication, let's see how we can better coordinate between the public health systems and community organizations and education organizations and food organizations and so on in this community. And as we do that, we will develop essentially a case study of solving a public health problem through complex organization. Likewise, for deployment of EVs. Likewise, let's say we want to develop transition to regenerative agriculture in a certain food supply chain. And I think it is by now acknowledged that you can't do this simply by having a regen ag startup. The startup needs an ecosystem around it. And it is on the development of that ecosystem that we must focus. And there are organizations that do that. For example, Transformational Investment in Food Systems, TIFS, is doing some of my favorite work in this space. And they essentially develop forms of complex financial organization that allow healthy development of a whole food supply chain. So we need to, I think, move our view from innovation as a product to also embrace innovation as forms of collaboration and complex organization in the economy. This is a powerful semi-uncharted territory in the mainstream field. It is powerful. It can solve these problems better than they can be solved by products alone. And I think that if we really direct our attention towards this, then we will develop this discipline to eventually have the kind of power that digital technologies have today.
Although I think, when I look back at, when there was a transition from vacuum tubes to transistors and then to integrated circuits, it's not like the vacuum tube industry had all this political power and was working to stop it. When it comes to healthcare, it's very clear in the United States that we pay twice as much as everyone else for healthcare, and we have the worst outcomes in the developed world. And everyone knows, including everyone here knows, if we shifted to universal healthcare, first of all, it wouldn't even cost the government anything, because again, we're paying twice as much. Half is paid by the government already. So for the same amount of money, we would have better, less expensive healthcare without bankrupting everyone. We know this, but that's not what stopped it. So the ability to have an alternative solution in this particular case is not the thing that's stopping us. When it comes to climate and fossil fuels, we know that fossil fuels will kill us and are killing us, and we know we have alternatives. But so it's not the lack of the knowledge of what we have to do or what we can do. So I'm saying, so in some things, like again, if you're going to have a new technology that replaces another technology, sure, you can do that and change the world that way. And AI is both a good and bad example of that. And then, but I think for the economic systems where there's incredible entrenched power, and the healthcare system where it's simply the insurance companies are skimming off 20% of all the healthcare dollars, and they like that, and they invest a very large share of that money, which is incredible amount of money, into buying politicians. So, any thoughts? I mean, I want what you're saying to succeed. But of course, we always run. We don't lack for knowing what we should do. We lack for, as you were describing, for the ability to do it. And any thoughts on that and on that side of it, and getting past the entrenched power?
Yeah, it's going to be a fight. There's no question. So I think that, in fact, one of the things that frustrates me about the impact space broadly and the climate space is that often people simply ask, how can we build something that's good? Like, how can we build a healthy form, a healthy technology, a healthy form of community, and so on. And like, that's nice, but we need to remember that the existing system has dominated the economy, not because it's better, but because it's more inclined to kill. So in fact, the modern form of civilization in the first place, it's not like, nation states dominated because they're better at feeding people and taking care of their health. No, they're dominated because they're more interested in killing others. So
they're going out to colonizing and things like that.
Yeah, so they've killed others. So we need to recognize this and know that we are going to, the system is going to try to kill us. There's no way around that. So whatever we design needs to be designed for that, to have teeth and to be able to defend itself, and even more importantly, perhaps be resistant to co-option. I think we can all recall stories of climate startups that were then bought by Shell and now are serving Shell's interests rather than climate's interests. So I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just saying that this is a type of innovation we haven't tried at an even remotely necessary scale. So I think if we try it, maybe it still won't work, but maybe it will. And another thing that comes to my mind, so I just recently finished this book that Tom Chi has published. Tom Chi is one of the founders of Google X originally, and now a climate VC, and he's probably quite possibly the smartest person I've met in my life, to my knowledge. And he wrote a book called Climate Capital. It has very little to do with capital, and he acknowledges that. But one phrase in that book is that there are many refrigerators that have lasted longer than all of shareholder capitalism. So the modern form of the economy that, yes, it's quite entrenched, but we perceive it as something that is just the way it is, but it's very recent. It's very recent. Right. And we have brought it into being. We can bring a new thing into being too. It was not gods who brought it into being, it was people. And people can bring a different one into being as well. And if we look at the history of humanity over a longer period of time, these things have changed many, many times. This isn't, it's not a unique moment in history when we have an entrenched system. This has happened many times before. These things tend to, either collapse by eating themselves alive, or tend to be outcompeted by something else, or people just walk away from it and develop their own thing on the side. And because people have walked away, the old thing has nothing to rule over. So all kinds of possibilities exist to exit it. But the first and most important thing is simply to see it as changeable and get out of the fatalistic mindset.
Oh, that's good. I like that. Yeah. So we're going to move on to some other questions from our co-mods and from some of the YouTube audience. But maybe you could end with what suggestions you, well, two things. One, what do you suggest to our audience in terms of work on climate? As you said, just I guess go on the website and start learning. I guess you gave that already. But just in general about this other thing we're talking about changing the system. Any words of wisdom to the audience members who are excited by that and would like to engage with that? What are your suggestions to them?
Yeah, I think my suggestion to them is to, how do I say that? Well, first of all, in terms of learning, develop basic systems literacy in the systems that you're working on, and just like try to start thinking about what can you do to make little changes to the way it is wired together, rather than just what products exist in that system. Right? That is something that most likely very few people are doing in whatever industry you're looking at. So you can be really disproportionately impactful if you do that. But this is uncomfortable. This is even more uncomfortable than other forms of innovation. So probably the most important thing is to start developing your community even more, because it's possible to do a job you're assigned to do alone in the corner. It's not possible to lead in the corner. That is not something that anyone is cut out for, and you're not going to be the first person in the world who is cut out for being a systems leader while working alone. So really focus on getting to know people who understand the system that you want to change. Let's say you want to do something about transportation. Well, start going and just like talking to people who are working on changing transportation. And again, maybe 70% of them will ignore you, but 30% will not. And through them, they will introduce you to more people who will not ignore you. And you will get to know them. And this way you develop a network of people who can help you make sense of it. A network of people where if you develop a good trusting relationship with them, then maybe one day they have an effort and they say, who's with me? And you say, I'm with you. And you join some effort that they're leading. Or maybe the opposite. Maybe as you learn from them and develop relationships with them, you will start seeing a gap. And you will decide that, like, for example, it looks like this industry standard, if we just changed it a little bit, it could really make it easier to deploy solutions. And you're going to be like, I'm going to lead changing this industry standard. I'm going to assemble a group of my buddies to figure out how we can change it. And you say, who's with me? And then these people in this industry who you've gotten to know will say, I'm with you. And they will help you do it right. And they will help you find others to do it with. So really develop your, I like to call it, your vision, your power, and your agency. Vision is how well do you understand the systems and leverage points. This is the easiest part. Power is the part that's much more uncomfortable to those of us with a technical mindset. This is knowing the right people and having strong relationships with them, and basically your ability to mobilize people. You can't do anything in systems without developing this quality, so go and develop it. And agency is the part that probably the hardest part, is seeing yourself as somebody who does this sort of thing and actually acting in it. And that only comes from trying things and seeing that you succeeded. It doesn't come from anything else.
And I assume that people interested in that can go and work on climate is one of the places they can go find the people to collaborate with.
That's correct. Yeah. And right now we are continuing to develop our programs that are going to be increasingly helpful to you in this. So, right now, honestly, don't expect to be wowed by our offerings in this, because we just began executing this strategy in full force at the beginning of this year or end of last year, but we will become increasingly better at this.
Very good. Okay, so we're gonna move on to invite Stacy on here, and hey there, Stacy. Hi there.
Hey, Stacy.
Hey, Dan. Hi, Eugene. Thanks for being here. I want to tell people, if you're interested in this, go through the questionnaire on Work on Climate. I've signed up. I'm looking forward to joining the conversation there. It's super easy, and they have one of the finest community guidelines I've ever seen. It's very well done. I had two comments from people in the audience here.
Well,
We should
let's do
ask,
your own first, and then we'll do Eli.
well,
and then
it dovetails into mine.
Okay.
We should ask AI, hi AI, how can we humans stop moving our clocks twice a year? And if AI requires a quarter of the nation's power and water, the algorithm is clearly not ready yet, LOL. So use a climate guy at an AI conference. How does that work?
Yeah, I think my thoughts about the intersection of AI and climate are a little bit nuanced. So let me say a few statements that I think may sound contradictory, and I'm happy to dive into why they're not. So one, I think that the fact that we have introduced AI into the current economic system is horrible. It would have been much better if we had never introduced it. It was kind of like, Prometheus getting fire from the gods into a world that has no fire safety, right? So I think that
That's a good one.
yeah, I think the role that it plays in the current economy is and it's not AI's fault. It's the fault of an economic system that makes it be applied to things that maintain or accelerate the status quo. And the status quo is leading us towards a climate collapse, so as well as other kinds of collapses. So now that we have introduced, the catalyst of AI in the economy, everything goes faster, and we have less time to address any of these threats. So certainly, big problem. And it's a much bigger problem than the emissions of AI. I think emissions of AI are a speck of dust on the face of how big this problem is. Like emissions of AI are maybe a couple percent of the global emissions, even in their projections. But when you hear fossil fuel companies say that they're going to use AI to double how much fossil fuels they're going to extract, that has nothing to do with emissions of the AI itself. This is an example of AI accelerating a harmful status quo. And this is where it's really harmful. It accelerates fossil fuel extraction. It accelerates propaganda. It accelerates accumulation of power in the hands of big tech companies who then want to maintain that power by catering to an authoritarian president and so on. So it accelerates all of these things that were already going on. So in that sense, it's very unfortunate. On the other hand, if we had a regenerative economy, hey, bring on all the AI. It's going to accelerate a good process instead of accelerating a bad process. It's one thing. The other thing is that this absolutely does not mean that I'm against using AI. I say, like, when it comes to good applications, use all of the AI you can, use it as hard and as well as you can, because otherwise it's going to be only the bad guys using it. It's a powerful technology. It really it has potential to transform how we do things, and God knows we need to transform the way we do good things. Okay. So right. Don't worry about the emissions you're going to cause with this. These emissions are going to be nothing either compared to the overall emissions that AI has of its own, and certainly absolutely nothing compared to the emissions it's enabling the rest of the economy to create.
Okay. Good point. Thank you.
Let's bring Eli in for a question. Hey, Eli.
Hi, thanks, Dan. So I'm very much with you on the idea that fear has been an insufficient motivator, even though it really should have been, and relatedly that we have to build the kind of civilization that we want, not just like work on this crisis and really emergency that's facing us, and then wind up with a world that still has a bunch of problems and isn't pleasant in other ways to live in. What I've hit on kind of parallels some of the things that you've described, and that involves actually utilizing recaptured carbon to build a civilizational infrastructure that is itself sustainable and meets the needs of the human population far more efficiently, which in turn would free up all of the resources and land and parts of the ocean that are being utilized very inefficiently, so that we can have a planet that supports 10 billion people at a better level of comfort than presently enjoyed by most, while rewilding 90%. So that's the vision that I'm laying out. And
What's the question, Eli?
I'm kind of throwing that out as how, do you see that paralleling the directions that you alluded to going into in the future, and if you could elaborate on those?
Mm-hmm. Well, Eli, I think that we are probably talking about the same future, but sounds like you're building a particular technology, if I understand correctly, that will be an important part of the future. Did I get you right?
Set of technologies, yes.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I think it's great that you're building them. I hope that you succeed. And I think in the context of our conversation, I would, again, encourage you to also look at what it's going to take to have the system ready for deploying your technologies. And if there is any possibility for you to work on that too, do that too. Or maybe even ask, like, is there something that can be done to have the systems in which you're deploying your technology ready for deploying other technologies like this as well? I don't know if this is making sense. I think I'm just continuing to say that product innovation by itself, it's necessary, but if it can be supplemented with structural innovation on the architecture of our industries and communities and economic systems at various scales, it can be even more powerful, I think.
Okay. Thank you.
So I guess independent of that, I was also hoping that you could go into a little more detail on, you alluded to some new efforts of your organization that were unfolding, and if you could clarify perhaps.
Yeah. So right now we have two main streams of work. All of these have to do with developing this distributed network of local industry chapters focused on driving systems change in that particular industry, in that particular place. And so one stream of work is the Bay Area Food Systems chapter, where we are running it ourselves. And we are in that chapter figuring out exactly how do we activate professionals in a certain industry to become leaders. And the second stream of work is us supporting community members who want to run their own chapters like that. So through that, we're learning how to do distributed leadership model for this. So for us, this is really a year of learning how to do this well. And as we learn this in future years, we will be able to apply it to increasingly complex problems.
Okay. So thanks, Eli. Stacy, I see not too many.
I have a couple here.
Okay.
The one from Humpers 42. Does Eugene think we need a collapse of capitalism to achieve regenerative economy?
I don't know. I hope not. So when I think about like my visual metaphor for what the transition looks like is, imagine an unhealthy forest that is beset with various problems. And then some kind of mycelium starts growing on the ground, and then new species start growing, and these species enter, they overtake the old forest, in some cases by just being alongside it, in some cases by developing a relationship of symbiosis with it, in some cases eating it alive and digesting it into something more healthy. So it's an incremental process that results in transitioning from one system to another. I think that if we simply say, down with capitalism, down with all of the power structures we have today, and we just take them down, I think what's going to grow on top of that is the exact same thing that we have today.
Okay.
One comment I wanted to read, Obsolete Optics. What good is an economy without an ecology? Which I think that's a good position to have. Aaron N. Gray asked, how do we reinstate the global commons and a parallel economy to make the existing system redundant and subsume it?
Yeah, I think that is exactly the work. So that is the work. Global commons are a mechanism of coordination and complex organization that we need to have. And right now we don't have it. And I think that this is a task as big in ambition as developing AI was 50 years ago or 80 years ago. So we need to work patiently and persistently on developing the art of new forms of organization in the economy, including deploying existing mechanisms of governing common resources at increasingly larger scale, and ultimately get to the global scale as well. And these mechanisms exist. Like, we don't need to invent them from scratch. In fact, Elinor Ostrom won the Nobel Prize in economics for documenting how humans have done this, which was contrary to mainstream economic wisdom at the time, which said that it simply can't be done. And not only can it be done, but it has been done. So we have the components of this, but we need to roll up our sleeves and get to the work of developing those kind of structural, architectural technologies.
Okay. Well, Eugene, I want to thank you for informing us, first of all, for doing the work to make this community available to everyone to start with in its original form, and for the work you're doing to transform it to develop climate leaders. I agree. I mean, when you look at the problems we face on climate, one of the big gaps we see is that we're just lacking leadership. It should be, people think climate scientists are supposed to be the climate leaders. Well, then where does that come from? And they're supposed to inform our political leaders, and our political leaders are supposed to lead us away from harm. They've chosen not to do that. They're not able to do that, whatever. There's wrong incentive systems for them. So we do need climate leaders, and there's not enough of them. So I wholeheartedly support what you're doing and look forward to seeing how that part of your community develops, because it's super important.
And is it okay to share with the community what we need in order to do it better?
I'm sorry, say it again.
Is it okay to share with your listeners what?
Oh yeah, please, absolutely.
Yeah. So the main thing we need is funding. So no surprise here, but we do need it, and it is philanthropic funding. It is basically, we can't really rely on the big foundations in this work, because they have a particular mode of action, particular paradigm, and what we're doing is a new paradigm. Nobody has the scope of, we're going to support organizations that develop professionals as climate leaders, because nobody has been doing that work before at this scale. So nobody has decided that this is where they're going to allocate resources. So we need people who really want this to be a thing. We need them to come to us and work together with us and help us resource this work. So we need that. The second thing we need is, if you are a professional who wants to organize others in your industry around transforming your industry, we need people like you, and we need case studies of success of this. So come to me and I'll tell you where to go next in terms of getting support from us. But again, we can only do this at a sufficient scale if we get sufficient funding.
And I assume people can get in touch with you by joining Work on Climate and linking with you and DMing you, for example.
Yeah, I am exceptionally easy to find. So hit me up on LinkedIn, hit me up on our Slack, email me at eugene@workonclimate.org.
There you go. Well, great. Well, thanks. That's a great way to end. And I also want to, by the way, remind everybody, since he's pitching for funding, we're not pitching for that, but we are pitching that you support the channel by subscribing, liking, commenting, sharing this program with others. I think it's a very important program. Again, we spend so much time talking about climate science, and we know kind of all we need to know. And we also know about climate solutions. But what we're talking about today with Eugene is really about how do we change the system so that we can actually make a better world. And again, thank you, Eugene, for all you're doing. And thanks for spending time with us today.
Yeah, thank you, Dan.
I really appreciate it. So thanks. You can stay on, Eugene, for a moment, and I'm going to end the show here. So everyone, let's see, next week on Sunday, we have Allison Taylor, who's a business ethics professor at NYU. And that's going to be a very interesting discussion about what big businesses are and aren't doing when it comes to climate change. So tune in next week for that. And everyone, thanks again. And Eugene, thank you. All right. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.